Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is youth violence and intentional injuries. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about youth violence and injuries that are inflicted intentionally Dr. Juarez, Dr. Paul Juarez from Meharry Medical College. And of course, Dr. Juarez is in the Department of Family and Community Medicine, and he'll give us some additional information in reference to that. And of course, Dr. Juarez, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Henning.
And to tell you, Dr. Juarez, how delighted we are to have you here, because the topic that we are going to deal with this morning is a very, very important topic, considering all the problems that we're having dealing with youth homicide and youth violence and et cetera. And I think in a real sense you bring a new perspective to this, dealing with what you and others have called intentional injuries. And we're going to have you to talk about that. But before we get into that, Dr. Juarez, let's talk about Dr. Paul Juarez, and to have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of eventually leading you to us this morning.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll start by saying I never had a clue that I'd end up in academic medicine, and so my pathway to get there has been sort of the road least traveled. My family actually, I was born in the Yakima Valley, and it's up in Washington State, and it's sort of the end of the migrant stream. And so my parents settled in that area and moved to Seattle in my middle school years. My dad got a job over there, and the family moved. But growing up, I, again, never really had any, going to college was always something that was very important to me. And I went to a local state college, Western Washington University, and got my bachelor's in psychology there. And I was excited about education and ended up getting a master's degree, going on to get my master's degree in school counseling. And at that point in time, I thought my career was going to be a middle school counselor. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I didn't last too long, and we had a great program. I love working with young people, but it was very difficult working in a school district. And again, at that time, Yakima was still a very segregated community, and it was a large Mexican-American community, and also a large American Indian. It was on an American Indian reservation, the Yakima Nation. And it was just a very difficult environment to work in. And when I left that, I got into juvenile corrections and did that for a number of years. And while I was doing that, actually met a professor from the University of Washington who was sort of precepting some graduate students, who were in a Master's of Social Work program in the Yakima Valley, and I had a chance to meet with them. And he was back in the time with Cesar Chavez and the grapes, and we were protesting and doing marches and all of that at the local grocery stores. But it got me thinking that while I thought it was very important working individually with young people and trying to make a difference in their lives, I was also very frustrated in the amount of effect or impact that I could have. And so as I talked more with, his name was Gilbert Lucero, as I talked with Dr. Lucero, he encouraged me to think about getting into a doctoral program. And for me, that was sort of outside of my realm of reality. I didn't have anybody in the family. There were no role models to, but he was very encouraging, and he got me to apply, and I got accepted. And it was a program at a university called Brandeis University. It's in the Boston area, and it was a program in social policy. And so my focus shifted from working on an individual level with people, with young people and their families, to one in terms of trying to change the environment through public policy. And so that sort of got me into really a different level of interventions. And from there, I met my wife, and she was another, she was in the doctoral program at the time we got married. And when we finished, we said, like, well, where do we want to go? Because we had no obligations or responsibilities at that time. And I said, let's go to Los Angeles. And it was just a whim, and so we went there, and ended up, both of us ended up getting faculty positions at Charles Drew University. And I was in a Center for Community Medicine at that time. And when I went there, the president, M. Alfred Haynes, invited me to come in and talk to him, and he's actually the person who had hired me. And Charles Drew, like Meharry, was a historically black college. And so part of what he told me is he said, look, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Margaret Heckler, at that time, said there were 6 areas that contributed disproportionately to minority health.
Very good. And of course, Doctor, let's hold that point there as we make preparations for our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up exactly at that point, because we think that's very important. And of course, let me take this commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short break. The topic is youth